Hi, good morning, Homestead friends. How are you? What we're going to do today in this video is put together a very simple brisket recipe. We're going to cook that on our Traeger Grill. So we're going to go through all the prep for that and then kind of show you the end result. Before we get started on the video, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell to get notification of future content. Let's cook it. Alright, so first things first. Gentlemen, you'll probably understand and appreciate what I'm talking about. One of the most important things of cooking a large piece of meat like this is don't use your wife's good towels. So, I don't have my wife's good towel. She's not going to yell at me. So, LaLa will be kind to me when I show her bloody towel at the end of this video. So, we got a 15-pound brisket we're going to cook today. We're putting it onto a cookie sheet to kind of get it seasoned. We haven't done one this large in the past. Normally they're about 2/3 of this size. So the first part is, in all of the recipes, whenever I smoke something, I always start with a rub. All right, so I've been smoking for many years. I've tried just about every cut of meat you can imagine. But I don't think I've ever done a brisket this large. So, accompanying doing lots of smoking is I've tried over the years countless rub recipes, and that's going to be no different for this recipe. This one's going to be a really simple, straightforward recipe. Only 3 ingredients, 3 dry ingredients. We're going to pretty liberally season it. We're going to put it onto our Traeger smoker at 225 degrees, and then we are going to let that sit. Every hour we're going to mop it to kind of keep the moisture in it. Once it gets up to a certain internal temperature, then we're going to wrap it up in foil and we're going to put it back on the grill to bring it up to its final temperature. We'll discuss that as we're going through the rest of the video. But this rub recipe, which I've already started, is essentially 3 ingredients. So we start off with equal parts of salt and pepper. So we're going to use 1 tablespoon of salt. Now I always use in all of my recipes a coarse salt. I just think it spreads out more evenly and you get less concentrate in your recipes using a coarse salt. It just distributes into the meat better, in my humble opinion. So equal parts of salt and pepper. So that's 1 tablespoon each, and then a teaspoon or 2.5 teaspoons of 2.5 teaspoons of just chili powder. Now I've used chili powder in rub recipes before, but I've never used chili powder in a recipe that only has 3 ingredients. So it's kind of like, I always tinker and mess with different recipes just to see which ones I like best. I very rarely, for example, I enjoy a beer. Very rarely will I drink the same beer twice. I try to diversify just so that I can kind of round out my palate a little bit. So what we have here is this 3 ingredient rub. We're going to put it on to the brisket. But before we do that, if you're familiar with brisket, you know that a brisket has lots of fat on it. You don't cook it with all this fat on it. That fat generally has to be trimmed off. I like to trim the fat down to about 1/4 of an inch. So we're going to trim this, get it ready to go onto the grill. Once we got a good fat layer on there, not too fat, it's going to go fat side up so that when we're cooking this, that fat absorbs into the meat versus draining off if this were fat side down. So we went to the tackle box and broke out the fillet knife for this process so that we could get in there and get good cuts. So there's what we got. So this is the back side that we just trimmed. You know, some parts might be a little bit more than a 1/4 inch, but all this is down to right at about a 1/4 inch of fat covering this side. So what we're going to do now is we're going to use our dry rub that we did. Again, it's just 3 ingredients. Rough or coarse salt. I use kosher salt, chili powder, and black pepper. Just those 3 ingredients. So we've got this on a baking sheet, and we're just gonna sprinkle this on and rub it in. Make sure you get the whole thing covered. There might be some little slits or folds in it. Make sure you get it up into those slits and folds. And again, this is kind of reinforced what I said earlier. Don't use Mama's good towels because you're going to get in trouble. Use the ones that I wouldn't say use my shop towels, but don't use the good towels because you're going to make a mess of them. What I'm doing there is I'm just dumping up some of the excess, and it's going to start kind of coating the back of this as well. Make sure, don't be skimpy on your rub, ever. Unless it's too salty or you got some overbearing flavor in that rub, then it can become a little bit much. But since this is just 3 ingredients, I'm not really concerned about that happening with this recipe. Hopefully this will be really, really good. If it's not, then I won't be trying this one again. I mean, we've done some that have really complicated recipes of, you know, 10, 15 ingredients, and you gotta set it overnight and let the flavors meld, and you know, I'm a firm believer in keep it simple, stupid, KISS. Sometimes complex is not better, sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. So some people might say, well, you know, you're out of your mind if they've seen it in my building videos, because none of those are simple. I make them really complicated, probably for my own entertainment more than anything else, but also for sturdiness of build. My stuff ain't gonna fall apart. When they put me in the ground, my buildings are still gonna be standing. So Little Rick will be inheriting probably these buildings that I built 20 years earlier, and wondering what he's gonna do with them. Alright, so I think that's got it right there. We got good coverage. Both sides, all the little nooks and crannies are covered. So I think this is about ready to go onto the grill. So I'm going to stick this directly on the grill grate. The oven, or the smoker, has been preheated to 225 degrees. We're going to put it directly on the grill grate, and we're just going to let it sit and begin to come up to temperature. In about an hour, I'll go out, I'll check on it, and I will mop this, meaning I'm using another liquid to essentially baste this while it's in the smoker. Again, that helps with putting flavor on the outside of the brisket, as well as maintaining moisture in the brisket, because when this starts cooking, that moisture is going to begin to leave the cut of meat itself. So we're going to try to add and keep some moisture in that by mopping it about once an hour. All right, let's get this thing on the smoker. So this is the Traeger Grill. I'm going to put this on and I'll give you a little bit of a tour. So this has been preheating for about an hour, up to 225 degrees. Put this on here. Turn it around so the thick end is down. There we go. We're going to put that in there. So on the Traeger, what you have is this right here. This is where the pellets are. We're using hickory pellets on this cook. It's got a digital readout here. We also have a thermometer that I will be putting into this. I'll come back out and put that in so that we can check the internal temperature of the meat from the digital readout out here. Like I said, I love this grill. As long as you follow the directions, you don't keep opening it and closing it. It makes maintaining a constant temperature super, super easy. Like I said, this will be on here about 8 hours, and I don't have to worry. It's kind of like set it and go. So the magic happens in the recipe and how you prep it versus trying to stand out here and maintain a constant temperature. So this ought to be super, super good. All right, so now we're going to make the mop sauce that we're going to use to keep the moisture in the brisket as it's cooking over the next 6 to 8 hours. So this recipe, again, this is from the Traeger website, but I generally take those recipes, I'll adapt it, modify it to kind of my taste, because I like tinkering and testing things. So that calls for a brown beer, that recipe does, and we're going to be using this, which is a dark brown German wheat beer from Julius Echter. This is a German made imported product. So it's 2 cups of whatever beer you want to use. I would recommend some type of a brown beer, whether that be a brown ale. So we're using 2 cups of beer, and then that's right at 2 cups. So I got 2 of them, so I guess one we'll use for the mop sauce and the other one I will drink while I'm using the mop sauce. So 2 cups of whatever beer you're going to use. We're going to turn the heat on low while we're adding the other ingredients to this. So a 1/4 cup of some kind of fat. The recipe says you can use bacon fat, grease, lard. I'm using butter for this particular recipe. So it is a 1/4 cup. Let that melt down. 2 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce. We're also going to use the same recipes we did the same ingredients we did in the rub. Same proportions, that way we've got a consistent flavor between the rub and the mop sauce. So again, it's 1 tablespoon of salt and pepper. Two and a half teaspoons or thereabouts of chili powder. One tablespoon of garlic salt. And 1 teaspoon of red pepper flakes, or thereabouts. I'm a red pepper flake fan. So now we're just going to bring this up to simmer until all of the dry ingredients kind of integrate well, the butter gets melted. Oh, that's good. Move it up to medium heat. What we want is really the salt to be melted. We want the the salt to be dissolved and integrated into the mop sauce, and then the butter to be completely melted. We'll bring it up to a very low simmer, and that's it. Now, before we want to put this sauce on, we want to make sure that it's got that the products are still, or the ingredients are still integrated. The butter may start to harden if we keep this inside. It's about 72 degrees inside. All right, so this is at the 1 hour point. Off video, I actually put in the temperature probe. So on this Traeger Grill, it's just the simple thing of pressing this button. So we're looking at probe 1. So right now the meat temperature is 68. We need to get it up to 165 degrees before we're going to wrap it up. So this is the mop sauce that we made, and I realized I couldn't find my mop. So we're going to do a little bit of southern engineering. I'm just going to pour this on here and then use a basting brush. Again, what we're doing is kind of keeping the meat from drying out completely. Probably won't even need the basting brush, it's working good. I'm using more doing this than I would if I was using the mop brush, but this looks good because it's going right into the meat. It's not. Like I said, I had to heat this up. I made it about an hour ago, then I had to heat it up a little bit because it had begun to congeal, the butter in it. It started to set up. That's all for this hour. We'll come out in an hour and do it again. Alright, so this has been on the grill for about 4.5 hours. We had to get the internal temperature up to 165 degrees. We've been basting this about once an hour with the mop sauce that we made earlier. So we're going to transfer this into the house. We're going to wrap it in aluminum foil. We're going to put it back onto the grill until the internal temperature gets up to 205 degrees. So we're going to put this into foil. We're going to wrap it up as tightly as we can get it. Put it back onto the grill at 205 degrees. So my preference when I'm doing this is to try to, actually I already did it, is to try to make a kind of a boat down in the bottom of this so that any juices that do come out of this do not flow down into the drip pan of the grill. So we're going to have to double wrap this because I already poked a hole through it right here. In fact, I'm going to take that piece off. So we fold it up onto the chunk of meat. That way we don't have, none of that juice is allowed to flow down in. And this is a special brand of special type Reynolds wrap that we use. It is the heavy duty and extra wide. So if you didn't use that, then you'd end up using the product that is not very wide, so you'd end up having to double it over. I just prefer this, so that's double wrap now, so none of that juice is going to get down in there. Then we will take another one and put it over the top. So that this is really tight. What we want to do is, as this heats up, we want moisture to now cook this meat, not just the heat that we've been doing. And you know what, I'm going to make somebody really happy. I'm going to give this to the cameraman so that he can taste test it, even before the chef has. All right, so we're going to put this back on. Alright, so if you look at the contour of this, this is the thickest part of this right here. So we're going to simply take this probe and we're going to stick it back into the thickest part of the meat. That's where you always want to take your internal temperature at. So it's going to be right there, and I'm just going to stick it right in through the side. Pinch that closed again. So we're just going to let that sit now until our internal temperature gets up to 205 degrees. When it gets up to 205, then we're going to take it off and we're going to let it sit for about 30 minutes. What that resting period does is allows that juice to go back into the meat as it's cooling down. So now we just don't touch it again until we get that temperature up. We can monitor the temperature on the Traeger Grill down here by pressing that button. So it's about 147 right now in that part of the meat. So it's a little bit lower than what I had the temperature before, so I was in a different part, so that might be just a little bit lower, so that's why the temperature variation. But we're gonna leave that sit, let the temperature continue to cook it slowly. All right, so we've been watching temperature on this for the last 3 hours. Patrick, get back. So we look on here, remember we gotta get temperature up to 204, so I missed it by a little bit, 206 degrees in that thickest part of the brisket. So we're gonna take the brisket off, take it in, put it on the counter, and just let the meat rest for 30 minutes. That's gonna allow some of the juices to begin to go back into it. The temperature of that brisket's gonna continue to rise for the resting period as well. So it really doesn't stop cooking once you take it off. So 30 minutes is what I recommend. It's what I've done with other cuts of meat, and that's kind of generally accepted. You know, I saw one recipe where they want you to rest the meat for 2 hours. I wouldn't go that far, but so we're just gonna take it off, take it inside. That's juicy. It folds right in half. Got a little leak right here. So that's what we want. That means there's a lot of juice in there. Patrick, open the door.
Patrick.
All right, so here we go. We've got the brisket. The brisket has been on the grill for a total of about 9 hours, 30 minutes of rest time. So recall from this morning, what we did is we took the rub, we rubbed the meat liberally on both sides, cut the fat off, down to about 1/4 inch on the top. We took the brisket, we put it onto the grill, brought that temperature up over a period of 5 hours to 165 degrees. At 165 degrees, we then double wrapped it, made sure it was really tight, put it back on the grill, and brought that temperature up to 204 degrees. Total cook time was about 9 hours, 30 minutes of rest time. So we're gonna open this up and show you what we got. There you go, a Robinson brisket, 15-pound slab of barbecue goodness. So this is the nice juicy part. So we got your fat ring right here. You got a little bit of smoke right here. Keep in mind this is a tougher cut of meat. It's the breast of this chest area of the cow. And look at this. It just falls apart. That, my friend, is tender brisket. Hey folks, thanks for joining us for the Robinson family dinner and our brisket. Everybody say hi. 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 Take care. Thanks for visiting the farm. Always remember, treat others as you would like to be treated. Be well.
Hey, subscribe and ring that notification bell while you're at it.